Kelly stood on tiptoe and fumbled for the light switch. A click, and the kitchen was drowned in the dim light of the bulb. What she'd mistaken for a thin, unprepossessing figure lurking behind the cupboard turned out to be nothing more than her mother's apron, hanging from a screw carelessly screwed into the wall. Darkness is a skilled illusionist. It can transform perfectly ordinary things into something frightening and strange. Kelly padded barefoot across the cold floor. Breadcrumbs stuck to her soles, digging into her soft skin and making her wince. Swarms of eternally hungry cockroaches scattered in her path like the waters of the Red Sea before Moses. A sour smell pervaded the kitchen, seeming to have ingrained the walls long ago. A bottle of vodka sat frozen on the table, reflecting Kelly's every movement in its glass sides. The ancient Viking refrigerator was perhaps the oldest tenant in the apartment. Kelly's grandparents had bought it when they were young. Now they were both buried, but the refrigerator still stood in its place, serving as a reminder of them. Kelly pulled the lever that jutted out of the pot-bellied door like a metal horn, and it creaked open. The door slid open. Swallowing, the girl scanned the shelves, searching for something edible and tempting enough to satisfy her sudden nighttime hunger. The Viking's contents were meager. There was a half-bitten blackened apple, a jar of cucumbers that looked like amputated fingers floating in formaldehyde, a couple of sandwiches on a flat plate, someone's large yellow eyes staring straight at Kelly, the remains of some sausage, a week-old borscht. Stop! Kelly's hand gripped the cold metal handle, and the muscles in her body tensed, as if an electric shock had run through them. She glanced at the middle shelf and saw them again, enormous yellow orbs with rectangular pupils. They stared at her from the back of the refrigerator, set in a flat, furry muzzle, bared in a grin. Kelly caught a glimpse of snowflakes swirling around the creature and a large, clawed paw before it disappeared from view. It seemed to close another door from the other side, and there, behind the shelves, a white wall covered in dirty stains reappeared. "Mom, there's someone living in our refrigerator," Kelly informed me the next morning as she and her mother knelt before the icons. The woman interrupted her morning prayers and pressed her thin lips together, her way of expressing disappointment. Her daughter read her mother's expression instantly and lowered her head, bashfully hiding her eyes. "Pray more fervently," Amanda snapped coldly. "You've stood before the face of God. Your thoughts should be directed to Him and to repentance. But here you are again, lost in your dreams, voicing your own fabrications. Shameless woman." Every word from her mother felt like a painful blow from a rod. Kelly cringed, feeling her gaze on her, heavy as mortal sin. The girl's imagination was indeed wild at times, but this time it was all real. A furry face with a grin from ear to ear, snow in the middle of summer, and yellow eyes. It was unforgettable. Kelly looked at the icons arranged on the small nightstand. Jesus gazed down at the girl from the largest icon, and after her mother's moralizing, it seemed to the girl that even He looked at her with sadness and condemnation. Tugging at the hem of her dress, the girl lowered her eyelids and strained, recreating in her mind the words of all the prayers she had memorized. Kelly didn't remember her real father, but she remembered almost all the men who had lived in her and her mother's apartment, filling the void left by her father. They were all bad and had greatly offended her mother, but Robert had turned out to be the worst of them all. He had appeared about a year ago and had taken root in their small family like a weed. The worst thing about him was that sometimes he seemed normal. He'd make his mother laugh, sneak candy to Kelly, and fix things around the house. But the girl soon realized these moods didn't last long. Igor harbored too many demons inside him, a whole legion of ferocious devils that regularly overwhelmed him, awakening the monster dormant within. At such moments he'd often bring his mother to tears, say horrible things to her, and even hit her. And when Robert picked up a bottle, everything became infinitely worse. On top of everything else, Kelly often caught his sticky, unpleasant glances. He loved to get physical. It all started with innocent pinches and tickles, but then the pinches became more painful, and Robert's fingers would constantly try to get under Kelly's dress. "You'll go to hell," her mother always repeated, "and hell is hot, monstrously hot, so hot that your skin melts like wax, and devils will dance around you, jabbing you with red-hot rods, rejoicing in your pain. Pray if you don't want to go there. Pray with all your might." And Kelly prayed. She clasped her little palms together, closed her eyes, and whispered the sacred words her mother had taught her. When Robert would throw another tantrum, smashing dishes and hurling obscenities at her mother, Kelly would pray too, asking the merciful God for only one thing: that Robert would disappear from their lives and that her mother would be happy. But apparently, Kelly's prayers were too quiet, for God never heard her. Are you up to your old tricks again? Hiding in the refrigerator in the middle of the night again? Amanda frowned and crossed her arms over her chest, then glanced at the remains of yesterday's sausage. Kelly's fingers, out of habit, clutched the wrinkled edges of her dress. She shook her head. She did have a habit of stealing something edible from the refrigerator long after everyone else was asleep, but she never left such obvious traces behind. "Kelly, how many times have I told you that gluttony is a sin?" her mother pressed, her tall, thin figure seeming to elongate even further, looming over the 9-year-old girl like a menacingly long and dark shadow. "I didn't touch it," Kelly replied quietly and hesitantly, feeling moisture gathering in her green eyes. "It's—" She almost made the mistake of mentioning the monster in the refrigerator again. Her mother sighed heavily, and there was something in that sigh that made the girl feel immensely guilty. Kelly didn't touch the sausage, but she still felt a sickening feeling creeping up her chest. Her mother seemed so exhausted and upset, and deep down in her childish soul, Kelly was sure it was her fault. "Go into your room and think about your behavior," Tatiana said wearily, tonelessly. "By God, Kelly, you're nothing but trouble and loss. If I catch you doing something like that again, I'll give you a spanking." The next morning, when her mother and Igor had left for work, the girl timidly approached the old refrigerator and pulled the handle. The door opened and Kelly peered inside, but saw neither the yellow eyes nor the furry face with the long, slitted mouth. From the depths of the Viking, only her mother's pots and pans stared back at her. After standing there for a while, searching for traces of the mysterious portal from which the strange creature had so recently stared at her, Kelly decided to test her hunch. Slowly she removed all the contents from the refrigerator, carefully arranged them on the kitchen counter, removed the shelves, and cleared the space so that the resulting niche would be large enough for a 9-year-old girl. Kelly climbed inside and closed the door behind her, but didn't slam it shut. lest she be trapped inside the freezing prison. The back wall of the refrigerator didn't give way immediately. Kelly was already frustrated and about to climb out. If her mother found her here, it would be very difficult to explain everything to her. But on her fifth try, the cold surface beneath her palms suddenly began to move. Kelly almost squealed with joy when she saw a snow-covered field and forest, surrounding the place with a monolithic wall of trees cloaked in white. The sky here was as black as the coffee Kelly's mother drank in the mornings. No stars, no moon. Only the occasional lonely streetlight, needle-like, jutting from the ground, dispelled the pitch-black, amorphous darkness. The light from the refrigerator fell like a yellow rectangle onto the snow. Kelly looked around and, groaning, crawled out of her shelter. Her bare feet sank knee-deep into the cold, and she hissed, feeling it burn her extremities. If she came back here again, she should have brought her boots. Thick flakes of clumped snowflakes swirled in the air and fell, showering Kelly's hair and shoulders. She didn't dare go forward. Here, next to the refrigerator, she felt calmer. It seemed as if she only needed to take a few steps to the side, and the magical portal would disappear, cutting off her path home. That's when she saw it. The owner of the huge yellow eyes and the long mouth, cutting across its furry muzzle from one pointed ear to the other, sat under the nearest street lamp, about 10 meters away from Kelly. He didn't move, simply silently watching her, a smile spreading across his face. "Hey!" she said accusingly, releasing clouds of milky steam. The creature raised a four-fingered hand in greeting. It was polite, but Kelly still remembered the half-eaten sausage that her mother had scolded her for. "Who are you?" she asked the furry stranger. He shrugged. "I just live here," he replied. The creature's deep, velvety, low voice echoed off the invisible walls, filling the space around Kelly. It spoke calmly and confidently, but despite the distance between them, the girl heard it as clearly as if it had spoken directly into her ear. Slightly taken aback, the girl grabbed the hem of her dress, but after a few seconds of prolonged silence, she finally decided on the second question. "Why did you eat from someone else's refrigerator?" "It was necessary," the other said in the same calm tone. "I wanted you to come and play." "That's not right." Kelly frowned. Her toes were numb from the cold. "Why?" the enveloping voice asked. "Because my mom got me in trouble." The creature considered. "I won't do it again." This satisfied Kelly, and she softened. "My feet are cold," she complained. "I'll come another time." With these words, she climbed back into the refrigerator, shaking the snow from her feet, feeling her little toes go numb. Before closing the Leningrad door, she took one last look at the winter landscape and her new acquaintance, still sitting under the lamppost. "My name is Kelly," she called to him, and he nodded. "Come play, Kelly. I'll wait here." The back wall of the refrigerator, transformed into another door, began to close, hiding the speaker from Kelly's view until it reached the corner and merged with it. There was no gap, no visible hint that it could easily be opened to enter another world. The apartment was warm, and Kelly jumped to the floor and hurried to the bathroom to soak her feet in the warm water. Only a minute later did she realize that the creature she was conversing with hadn't opened its mouth once during the conversation. It was simply smiling. Every time her mother or Igor grabbed the silver handle of the refrigerator, Kelly froze. But behind the heavy, rounded door was nothing but groceries and the food her mother had prepared. This made Kelly breathe a sigh of relief and, somewhere deep in her naive, childish soul, feel special. Her new friend clearly didn't want to open up to anyone but her. However, she had to wait 2 long days until Monday to see him again. At one point, the girl even feared that the creature from the refrigerator wouldn't wait that long and would find another friend. On Sunday, Kelly's mother dragged her to church, and the 3-hour service, which had always seemed unbearably long to her, this time dragged on for an eternity, leaving her shifting impatiently from foot to foot. The priest, a tall, thin man with a gray beard, put on his glasses and read the sermon, but Kelly wasn't paying much attention. Her thoughts were preoccupied with the old refrigerator and the magical passage to another world she had so fortunately discovered. On Monday, she practically skipped home from school, knowing she'd only have a few hours before her mother and Igor returned from work. Throwing her backpack on the doorstep and kicking off her sandals, Kelly rushed to the closet, found her boots from last year, and, sincerely hoping she hadn't outgrown them, ran to the refrigerator. This time, the back panel gave way on the first try. As soon as she pulled away, Kelly swung her legs over the edge of the shelf, pulled on her shoes, and jumped into the soft snowdrift. The snow crunched pleasantly under her boots. Kelly's new acquaintance was still sitting there. In the light of the lone lantern, his large yellow eyes seemed to glow even brighter. The girl froze, looking at him, not daring to move far from the refrigerator. The creature slowly straightened and moved toward her. The closer it got, the better Kelly could see it. Its fur was thick, so thick that it hung down in a heavy fringe, hiding its massive legs. It had a shaggy tail, which seemed to grow from its spine and resembled a cloak of furs, the hem of which trailed behind, covering its owner's tracks. Its head was round and disproportionately huge. It resembled both a mammoth and a giant cat walking upright. When Kelly and the creature were only a few steps apart, it stopped and peered down at the girl. Its yellow eyes were frozen in the rectangles of its vertical pupils, with tiny black dots swirling around them like gnats. "You've come," a voice said in the darkness with satisfaction. And again, to Kelly's surprise, the creature's mouth didn't move, remaining stretched into a wide smile. "What's your name?" she asked hesitantly. "Galore," the darkness surrounding them answered for him. "How do you do it?" The girl furrowed her brow. "Talking without opening your mouth," Kelly explained. The giant cat's face showed no emotion. "I don't need that. There are many other ways. Will you teach me?" Small fingers, out of habit, clutched the hem of her dress. "Someday, when you're ready," Galore assured, and Kelly frowned. "I'm ready now." "Really?" The creature didn't answer. It turned slowly, extended its hand, and pointed a thick finger toward the strip of forest white with snow covering the trees. "Only those who have been granted the honor of entering the thicket can speak without moving their lips." Kelly swallowed. She was afraid to take even a few steps, and the forest was so insurmountably distant. The mere thought of leaving the refrigerator and the portal leading home for such a long distance made her dizzy. "What's there?" she asked. "A magical land," Galore purred with a smile. A place where there are no moms and dads, where girls and boys are free from everything that has held them back before. A place where each of them is special. They can communicate without using their mouths. They know no pain, and they fly. Flo-o. Kelly laughed, but new questions flashed through her young, fair-haired mind, forcing the girl to pull her serious face back onto her face. "And are there many others?" she asked doubtfully. "Oh, yes. Many!" exclamation mark. The creature nodded vigorously, like a puppet controlled by an invisible ventriloquist. "Lots of little friends." "And how do I get there?" Kelly swallowed nervously. Galore smiled. She wasn't hungry, and Kelly, resting her cheek on her hand, stirred her long cold soup with a bored expression. "Don't fool around. Have you lost your appetite?" Amanda had a fresh bruise on her face. Last night she and Igor had had a heated argument, and the row had quickly turned into a brawl. But even later, Kelly heard the bed creak in her mother's room. When she cautiously approached the door and peered inside, she saw two wet bodies entwined. Igor growled and moved horribly, nestled between her mother's spread legs. His vile, hideous body, covered in horrific markings, throbbed. Her mother's face was tear-stained and red. She quietly begged the man leaning on her to stop. But she didn't try to push him away, instead wrapping her pale legs around his torso. Kelly was disgusted by the sight and went back to her room, where she heard the sighs of the two adults through the wall for the next hour. And later, when it was all over, her mother giggled and said something to Igor. Listening to their indistinct voices, Kelly fell asleep. Now, sitting at the table, she replayed the events of the previous evening over and over in her head, trying to understand what exactly compelled her mother to endure her partner's beatings, and then later cuddle with him in bed. "Are you sick?" Amanda cast a worried glance at her daughter. "I'm just not in the mood, Mom," the girl complained, watching the small whirlpool created in her plate by the movements of her spoon. "Despondency is a sin," her mother snapped, wiping her hands with a towel. "Come on, eat. I know you. She has no appetite in the morning, and at night she runs to the refrigerator." Kelly blushed and reluctantly swallowed her first helping of soup. "Mom, when is Igor leaving us?" she ventured to ask, and Tanya looked at the girl in confusion. "What made you think he'd leave?" Kelly's dad left before she was 4. Then there were other men whose faces blurred in her memory. They all left, sooner or later. Robert lingered longer than all the others. At some point, her mother stopped bringing new candidates for Kelly's father into the house. For 3 years, no one showed up, and Amanda, who had never previously shown any piety, suddenly embraced religion. Igor, however, had appeared on the horizon only a year ago, but it would have been better if he had never come. In response to her mother's question, Kelly merely shrugged her thin shoulders. "He hurts you, doesn't he?" "Everyone fights sometimes," her mother replied sharply, as if making excuses. "You have to learn to forgive. That's what Jesus taught us." Uh-huh. Kelly turned away, looking at the green treetops outside the window. It was sunny and warm outside, But the girl was drawn to something completely different. It's always winter on the other side of the refrigerator, but it's impossible to freeze there. Kelly feels the cold burning her skin, but its tingling always feels so pleasant and right. The main thing is to remember to put on boots, because feet are not so comfortable in the snow. But despite the frost reigning in the other world, Kelly could walk around there for hours in a dress without even thinking about putting on a jacket or a hat. And in the magic land, hidden in the heart of the forest, the snow falls upward. There are no worries, no problems, and no taboos. That's because in those places there never was a God dictating rules and judging every thought, so says Galore. He waits for her every time, sitting patiently under a lamp post, as if life on the other side of the refrigerator stops with Kelly's departure. They wander through the snowy field, and Galore tells her incredible stories about the magic land and its inhabitants. He says Kelly will have many friends when she gets there. Her palms sweat at such moments. Most of the peers she knew in real life were cruel and mean. They teased her for her old and tatty clothes, her protruding ears, and the large gap between her teeth. She found it hard to believe that such a place existed where everything could be different, but Galore seemed convincing. 3 weeks after her first foray into another world, Kelly fell ill. Her mother frowned, forced her to drink large quantities of hot tea with honey, and rubbed her with vodka, trying not to leave her daughter's side unless necessary. "Where did you manage to catch such a bad cold last summer, Kelly?" Amanda asked worriedly. But there was no irritation in her voice. Kelly only shrugged and looked at her mother with a guilty look. Then they lay together, watching some stupid cartoons on TV, and for the first time in a long time, Kelly felt truly happy. It was the last time she and her mother were this close. Bad events have no timetable. They are always untimely and come inexorably, one after another, just when you imagine all the bad things are over. Igor, who had rushed off on a week-long business trip, returned in a bad mood. New scandals were quick to follow, and in the mornings, Kelly's mother would emerge from the bedroom with red eyes, bluish spots on her face, and marks of a man's rough fingers on the white skin of her neck. Seeing her daughter's intense gaze on her, understanding everything but hesitating to ask, Amanda became tense and told Kelly not to stare. What Kelly couldn't discuss with her mother, Galore happily listened to, absorbing the girl's heartfelt outpourings greedily, like a sponge, and asking clarifying questions. Robert's new work schedule made things even worse, as it allowed him to be in the apartment on days when Amanda was on shift. Kelly didn't like being alone with a man who was increasingly alcoholic and prone to aggression. While drinking, Robert tried to appear kind and tried to bribe Kelly with pleasant words or sweet treats, but something else hid behind his nasty, gap-toothed smile and blazing eyes. At such moments, Robert's face resembled a rubber mask, concealing his true nature and thoughts. He never missed a single opportunity to let go, to grab Kelly's hand painfully and pull her toward him, to slide his rough fingers under her dress, to bury his nose in her neck. His prickly stubble dug into her skin, and the smell of alcohol was intoxicating. When he tried to get under her clothes again, Kelly bit him, and Robert became enraged. With one blow of his heavy hand, he knocked the girl to the floor, pinned her arms to the floor, and then, drooling and growling, he towered over the thrashing, skinny creature, feeling completely in control. That's how Amanda found them, returning home from work early. Kelly remembers her mother's eyes widening and bloodshot, how she wanted to scream for help, but the sound got stuck somewhere in her throat. And then Robert suddenly let go of her and raised his hands in the air, looking guilty. "She started it," he swore. "She was spinning around in front of me, trying to kiss me, saying she saw us doing it in the bedroom, But his excuses were drowned out by the machine gun fire of her mother's screams as she lunged at him, slapping him in the face with her palms and delivering resounding slaps. At some point, this reactivated the cruel predator instincts lurking within Robert. He grabbed Kelly's mother by her slender wrists and drove his knee into her stomach, causing her face to turn purple. Tatiana let out all the air she'd been holding and sank to the floor. "Have you calmed down?" Robert asked her sternly. "Calm down and think twice next time before you do something so stupid." As soon as he left the room, Kelly rushed to Robert, hugging her tightly and pressing her tear-stained face to her mother's cheek. But Kelly roughly pushed her daughter away, her eyes flashing, and for the first time, the girl read in them something far colder and more deeply wounding than disappointment. "You're a nasty thing, Kelly," Amanda spat. "So you got back at your mother?" The confused girl backed away. "I didn't do anything. Mom, I'm sorry. He would never have looked at you if you hadn't forced him." Kelly doesn't remember the belt appearing in her mother's hand. All she remembered was how painfully it burned her flesh, how invisible snakes stung right through her clothes, while the voice of the woman who gave her life repeated, "People like you go to hell. You'll burn in hell, you little brat, because it's hot there. It's monstrously hot there." At that moment, 9-year-old Kelly's unstable mind wavered in a pitiful attempt to maintain balance, only to fall into the welcoming embrace of creeping madness. Said the creature living in Glora's mouth as soon as Kelly, having overcome the barrier from the back of the refrigerator, found herself back in his world and stepped into the snow. Tiny fingers tugged at the fabric of her tattered dress, and bright stripes and scars covered the girl's pale, thin legs and arms. Her cheeks were swollen from tears. Looking into her red face, Galore saw all the pain seeping from every cell of Kelly's body. "What happened to you?" asked the voice, coming from all points in space at once. At times, Kelly felt as if Galore already knew all the answers, but he continued to politely inquire. The girl responded with a whimper, and salty streams began to flow from her puffy eyes again, and with them her confused and incoherent story burst forth. However, Galore did not interrupt her. He listened silently and nodded until Kelly finished, and only then did a voice from outside break the silence between them. "It seems Mom loves Igor much more than she loves you. It's sad." "No." Kelly, tearful, shook her head, refusing to accept the truth. "It's not true. Mom loves me." "Of course she does," Galore responded immediately. "Do you feel it? Do you sense her love, Kelly?" And instead of a confident "yes," she forced out a stifled sob. Mom had loved Dad once upon a time. Kelly knew this for a fact because something inside her lingered for a long time after his departure. And Mom also loved Jesus. His portraits filled their stuffy apartment. Mom taught Kelly to love Jesus too, but she, looking at the holy images, saw only emotionless, unsmiling strangers. and, undoubtedly, Mom loved Robert. After all, she had endured so many of his beatings and abuse. Kelly remembers her happy, sweaty face when she found them in bed after yet another argument. The look in Mom's eyes spoke volumes, but with Kelly, she hardly smiled, only pointing out her shortcomings and demanding that she pray more earnestly for absolution, although Kelly herself frankly couldn't understand the terrible deeds for which she was asking forgiveness from an invisible and incorporeal listener. Galore stepped forward, extended a large furry paw to Kelly, and when she placed her tiny hand in it, he slowly led her forward through the crunchy snow straight to the edge of the dark forest. Kelly had never been so far from the refrigerator. They stopped at the very edge of the dense thicket, and only then did the girl peer over her shoulder to see a dim light shining from the depths of the open refrigerator they'd left behind. "You're almost ready to go to the magic land," Galore announced joyfully. "But those who go there never return." "Never," Kelly breathed, releasing wisps of pale steam. "What about you, Mom?" "Adults aren't allowed in there," Galore's voice reminded her. "Mom will be happy when she finds out you've gone to the magic land. Haven't you realized yet? She doesn't want you near her and Robert anymore." Galore smiled. His huge yellow eyes were magnetic, and Kelly suddenly realized that no one had been as honest and kind to her as this monster from the refrigerator in a long time. No one had ever listened to her the way he did, and no one but Galore had ever offered her what she truly wanted, a life without pain or worries, friends, real friends. "Will you take me there?" Kelly asked quietly, as if she had no right to such requests. "Of course," Galore promised her. "But first you must pass a test and perform one little prank for me." Giggling, and immediately pinching herself painfully for these careless displays of emotion that could have woken her mother, Kelly crept around the apartment. First, she slipped into the bathroom. Galore hadn't lied. Kelly had no idea how her new friend could know what was going on beyond his frosty world, but just as he'd said, Igor was lying fully clothed in a bathtub full of long, cold water. An empty cylinder once filled with the strong vodka, whose smell Kelly disliked, lay on the floor nearby. Igor slept with his mouth open, snoring loudly, and a trickle of drool dripping from the corner of his lips. Then Kelly moved back to the kitchen, and barely containing her laughter, pulled out an old water heater from the back of the cupboard. Galore said Robert would definitely freeze in the water, and Kelly should take care of that. Moved back to the bathroom, stuck the plug into the empty sockets of the outlet, and dipped the metal coil of the kettle into the water. Then she went into the bedroom and found her mother sleeping peacefully on the edge of the bed. The woman's face looked sad. Kelly carefully approached, touched her cheek with her lips, and, having confirmed that her mother was sleeping soundly, went to get her markers. With one confident and careful movement, Kelly drew a smile on the woman's face, extending the lines of her lips with black strokes and curling them toward her ears. It was much better this way. The artificial smile on her mother's face made Kelly giggle again at her own mischief. It was almost time to go back when another idea occurred to her. Kelly was sure her idea would amuse Galore. She walked from icon to icon, smoothly adding smiles to the holy faces. Now those faces no longer seemed judgmental or sullen, and Kelly was suddenly overcome with calm. Throwing down the markers, she returned to the refrigerator, cast a final farewell glance around the kitchen, sighed, and climbed inside, closing the heavy pot-bellied door behind her. It was darker here today than usual. The street lights were out, and the black sky seemed closer. Only the white sheet of snow created a contrast with the surrounding darkness. Galore's huge, formerly yellow eyes glowed blood-red, dispelling the deepening darkness. "The time has come," he announced as soon as Kelly emerged from the cold metal box. "I've done it," she said, wincing from the suddenly palpable and stinging cold. She had never felt cold here before, but this time it was different, and shivers began to rack her fragile body almost immediately. But Kelly tried to ignore it, staring happily at her friend. "Now will you take me to the magic land?" she asked him hopefully. Galore purred. Closing the door of the old Viking on this side of reality, the two of them tied heavy chains around it, the ends of which Galore slung over his shoulder. The pair walked toward the darkening picket fence in the distance. Kelly hugged herself with her thin arms, her teeth chattering, while the unusually silent creature beside her stubbornly dragged the refrigerator behind him, leaving a long, deep rut in the snow. Reaching the edge of the forest, Galore didn't stop but continued on, illuminating the path with the spotlights of his eyes and picking his way through the trees with the heavy load behind him. Kelly paused for just a moment, lost in thought, looked anxiously back the way she'd come, sighed, and followed her guide. In the depths of the thicket, about 100 meters from the forest edge, refrigerators lay scattered here and there. There were so many of them that Kelly soon lost count. Old Soviet and new, imported, of various shapes and sizes. Occasionally she came across children's shoes next to them, sandals, shoes, and booties discarded in disarray. Galore weaved between the Vitex and Indesits, abandoned by unknown owners for a long time, until he finally stopped, parking Kelly's Viking in a vacant space amidst the cemetery of abandoned appliances. Having unchained the refrigerator, he opened the door, and a yellowish light spilled onto them from within. "Still haven't changed your mind?" Galore asked her. The red lights of his eyes looked at Kelly expectantly. She shook her head. "A magical land is just around the corner," a voice assured her, filtering through the trees and from the treetops surrounding them. "Would you like to leave a goodbye message for Mom?" "Maybe," the girl said, hesitantly. She thought for a moment, curling her toes on her feet, which were freezing even through her boots. One single question still haunted her, and then Kelly finally decided to ask it. "Galore, where are we now?" she asked her huge, terrifying companion. In the dim yellow light, a smile like a deep cut split his wide mouth. Lucas, hiding from the downpour under the awning at the entrance to the building, was finishing his second cigarette. "So, what exactly happened?" James Wilson, a small, plump, balding man with tiny eyes and an insistent personality, queried the local police officer. That morning, all the residents of the building had been alarmed by screams, sirens, and police cars and ambulances parked outside their home for several hours. In a quiet neighborhood like this, such events usually lingered in the spotlight for a long time, accumulating new rumors and details. The overly curious Wilson, a leading collector of local gossip, didn't want to miss the opportunity to learn the truth firsthand. "Godspeed, James. I don't want to talk about this." Lucas waved the man away. All he wanted now was to get into a hot shower, wash away the memories of the previous morning, and fall into a deep sleep.